Hi everyone, welcome to another lecture in Terraform for Cloud Engineers series, and this is the lecture number 7. And today we'll be talking about resource block in Terraform, which is a very important concept as such. And without wasting the time, let's get started. So first, I'll just put some basics so that you get an idea about HashiCorp configuration language, which is used for writing the configuration files as such. So as I mentioned, Terraform basically uses configuration files that are written in HCL language, and abbreviation for HCL is like HashiCorp configuration language. And what I mean by configuration file is basically the files which have an extension of .tf, wherein in previous lectures we have seen main.tf, provider.tf, variable.tf. These are the whichever ending with an extension of .tf, those are considered as a configuration files. And basically the configuration files are made up of blocks and arguments as such. And these blocks on a high level provides information about infrastructure platform, whether it's Google, Azure, AWS, Alibaba, or whatever, and the resource within that platform which you want to create, like compute instance, storage bucket, and so on. So a lot of talking. Let me show you an example what I mean so that you get an idea. So this is one of the resource in GCP. And if you could see, this is like Google storage bucket. So let me show you from there. I have copied this. If I go to my Chrome and if I just type GCP storage bucket Terraform, and if I open this Terraform registry, so here you go. This is an resource of Google storage bucket, and I have copied it from here because here they have less arguments and only the required ones, I think. So every resource may have required arguments like this: name, location, and few optional. So if you see name is required, location is required, that's why they have this is mandatory. Yeah. So this is an example of Google storage bucket, wherein this is known as the block, which is like resource in this case. Terraform also have other blocks like variable block, data block, and so on. We'll talk about it in the later lectures, but for this lecture, focuses on the resource block. So if you see, this is the block name which I mentioned is as resource, and this is the resource type. Over here, the resource type is storage bucket, and out of which Google is the provider and storage bucket is the resource. And this is the resource name. It can be anything. This is just a resource name and not the Google storage bucket name. Google storage bucket name is this. This is just a resource name, which is for this resource. And the importance of this is we'll talk about in future lecture, because I don't want you to get confused now. So this is just a name, resource name. It can be anything. So as I mentioned, the first element in this file is called as a block. And how you can identify whether it's a resource block, because it starts with a curly braces, open curly braces, and it ends with a closed curly braces as such. So the type of block which we see here is called as resource block. Yeah, as I mentioned. And what else? So we do have many resource blocks. This is one of the example of storage bucket, right? And if you want to see compute instance or Google Compute Engine, so this is the Google Compute Engine and this is the resource block. And let's see, where is Google Compute Engine? I don't know if I have missed that. Yeah, Google, this is IAM. Google Compute Instance, yeah, this is the one. So this is the resource block for GCE, Google Compute Instance. If you see, this is the resource block for compute instance. Over here is Google is the provider, and this is the resource type, this whole, but in which Google is the provider and resource is the compute instance, and this is the name, which can be anything, and these are the arguments. Arguments may be different for resources. Like for storage bucket, we have seen it was something different. This is nothing but the in console, whatever configuration options you see, right? That's the one. So if you want to see argument reference, go over here. As I mentioned, few are required and few are optional, if you could see. So have a look at it. And yeah, that's what I wanted to explain you right now. But let's go back to this. And this is the block type which I've mentioned, which is like resource over here. And this is the resource type, as you could see. And this file name is main.tf, for example. But this is the resource type, and over here Google is the provider and storage bucket is the resource, and this is the resource name, and this can be anything. And these are the arguments and key and values you could see. So this is for Google storage bucket, but it may differ for Google Compute Engine and so on as such. And let me show you another interesting provider, which is like local provider, because that creates the files locally. If you just enter local, let me go back, Google Cloud Platform, and let's go to documentation. Let's type local. Yeah, here you go. So this is again a provider, and if I just go to use provider, yeah, something is missing. Okay, I forgot to click on the documentation. My bad. So if you could see, local provider has two resources, like local file and local sensitive file. What is local file? Generate a local file with the given content. So even you can create a new file from Terraform within Windows. So let me show you that if I can real quick. And this is the example usage wherein resource, and this is the resource type, and the provider over here is local, and this is the resource file, and this is the resource name. And these are the two arguments, like whatever content you want to put into that local file, you can put it over here and you can mention the path. So I think this is quite good on a high level to understand about the resource. So another thing which I want to mention over here is like resource are nothing but an object that Terraform manages. And it is a fundamental element in Terraform. Basically, it describes one or more infrastructure objects. So it can be Google Compute Engine, as I mentioned, storage bucket, and so on. And it can be like in AWS, we have S3 buckets, DynamoDB, or anything like that. But it may differ from cloud to cloud, but the syntax remains the same, whether it's GCP storage bucket or AWS S3 bucket. Few changes will be there, how they are constructing it, but almost, but like for AWS, it may be like, let's see, and AWS S3 bucket, AWS S3 bucket Terraform. So it says opening Terraform registry. And if you go down to an example, so if you could see again, it's a resource over there and AWS S3 bucket. So as I mentioned, AWS is the provider. This full block is resource type, this under double quotes. And over here, AWS is the provider and S3 bucket is the resource. And this is the resource block name. And these are the arguments. So yeah, just thought to mention that. And what else? So basically, I think this is quite enough for you guys to understand about resource. And you already know that simple Terraform workflow consists of different steps. So I think these are the 4 steps. Like, you first have to write the configuration file, which is your code, infrastructure as a code. And then you need to run the Terraform init command. And then you have to review the execution plan as such and apply the changes if you think everything is perfectly fine.